What's up guys, it's Ike here from Metal Homebrew. Welcome back to another grain to glass video. Sorry it's been a while since I put a video out. Life's got in the way, you know how it is. Today we are going to be brewing one of my all-time favourite beer styles, a double IPA. There's lots of different ways they can sort of present, but for me, I like a double IPA to be big, thick, juicy, and have a slight bit of sweetness to it. Don't know why, that's the way I like it. They're not sessionable, they're not the sort of beer you'd sit and smash 6 or 7 of. You'd be absolutely written off if you did. But I love them. I'm shooting for around 8.5% I think for this one, so hopefully it all comes out okay. As always, first thing I did was prep all of my water the night before. I'm doing a small batch of this beer, I'm only doing 9 litres, but as I always do, I've used Tesco Ashbeck water. I'll link that water profile up there. And given that I want a big, bold, juicy double IPA, I'm going to stick with what I know works. And that's the Verdant water profile, so really boost that chloride to sulfate ratio, which will give it that thick, full body, just lend itself nicely to that beer. Again, there's the Verdant water profile up there. It's a brilliant water profile. I use it all the time and it works absolutely beautifully for anything sort of hazy, anything juicy. Right, onto the recipe itself then. It's a fairly typical sort of hazy IPA, double IPA recipe. It's nothing nothing fancy. I've gone for about 70% of extra pale Maris Otter. I've then added in 15% wheat and 15% oats and 10% wheat. That will just aid the head retention and give it that thick, creamy body and mouthfeel. And then finally, I've added in about 5% of dextrin malt. So it's fairly typical. It's nothing outlandish. It's just quite a lot of grain to get to that sort of high alcohol percentage we want. So there's a strong possibility I'll be throwing some rice hulls or something like that in there, but we'll see how the brew progresses. As you can see, the mash here is going pretty well. This is a different style of brewing for me. I've recently started doing these small batches, which is why I'm using a grain bag in the Brewzilla. Just because of the way they're built, you can't do small batches without putting the grain bag in because it just doesn't work. This is only the second time I've done it, so I'm hoping things work out well, but at the moment it's all looking good. You can see the colour's nice, it's all draining properly, and I haven't had to add any rice hulls whatsoever at the moment. Right, the mash all went absolutely fine on that beer, not worried about it in any way. So I've raised the grain basket and sparged in my normal way, so a jug of water, letting it run through the bag. It's a little bit more difficult with the bag, I was finding. I've sort of had to use these clamps and raise it up and drain it through that way, but it seems to have worked pretty well. Once the sparge is done, I've turned my heaters on to full and I'll let it gradually heat up to the boil while I do a few other bits of cleaning, bag the grains up, that sort of stuff, the usual brew day shenanigans. But anyway, we'll catch up again at the boil. So we're now at a nice rolling boil. This is a 60-minute boil, and there are quite a lot of hops in this beer, but not many of them in the boil, which you'd sort of expect from a beer of this style. My first hop addition is at 10 minutes left of the boil, where I'm adding a small amount of Dorado. Following that, there's no more hop additions in the boil. They all come as aroma hops or dry hops, i.e. whirlpool hops or dry hops. So for my aroma hops, which I will turn the heating element off, let it cool down to 80 degrees C, and I will add some Nectaron and some Strata, which I will just let sit for 30-40 minutes just to extract all of that aroma and flavour. The next stage after that will be 2 separate dry hops, but I'll discuss that more when we get there. As I said, not many hops in the actual boil. It's mainly going to be the dry hop. There's a very big dry hop charge twice in this, which should give it that uber juicy, fruity character that we're after. Right, the boil has now been completed on this beer. However, I took my final gravity reading and found I was quite a ways off my target. I was a lot lower than I should be. That is, to be honest, quite often the case when you're brewing high gravity beers, but equally I'm also brewing on a whole new setup for me, so I expected some issues with that. So what I've done to counteract that is I've just added some ordinary table sugar. People get really funny about that, but it's honestly nothing to worry about. As long as you're not putting in like 20, 30, 40% of your grain bill of sugar, you're not gonna have any issues. I put in, I think, a couple of 100 grams off the top of my head. It was less than a couple of percent. And that just boosts that gravity back up a little bit to get me more in the realms I want. It's still ever so slightly low, but I'm not that bothered. It should come out fine. It's not going to dry the beer out or anything like that in those quantities. It will just boost that gravity and hopefully get me back in the ballpark of where I want to be. Alright, so I boosted my gravity back up to where I need to be and chilled this beer down. I've now transferred it into the fermenter and I'm adding my yeast. I'm a stickler for tradition. I use verdant IPA yeast all the time for these kind of beers because it works so beautifully well for them. So I've done it with this beer. I know I've only brewed a 9 litre batch, but I'm sticking 2 packets in just because it's high gravity. That should just help it ferment out a little bit quicker, a little bit better, and get plenty of that juicy, fruity character from the verdant IPA yeast. So that's now in there, and I'm going to put this to bed. The plan is to keep it fairly simple in terms of fermentation. So I'm just going to ferment this at 20 degrees C throughout the duration of it. As I say, I'll chat about the dry hops in a little while, but let's get that put to bed, and we'll catch up at the dry hop. We are about 30 hours into this double IPA brew day, and it is fermenting away nicely as expected with the verdant IPA yeast. It is now time to do my first dry hop edition, so I thought now would be an ideal time to have a quick chat about dry hopping. It's one of those issues that's contentious. You ask 10 homebrewers how they think the best way to dry hop is, and you get 50 different answers. In all honesty, dry hopping techniques is a whole video in itself, one I don't propose to get into because everyone has their own opinions on it, and most methods have their own pros and cons, as with anything. The sort of research and what most big breweries are doing at the moment for maximum flavour and aroma extraction of dry hops is they are letting the beer ferment out. They might dry hop during active fermentation for biotransformation, but any sort of late addition dry hops at the end of fermentation, what they're generally doing is cold crashing the beer to about 14 degrees C. What that does is it will drop out all of the hop matter, the vast majority of the yeast, and any other sort of floating bits in there. And then they will dump all of that, so they're just left with the beer, and then they will dry hop on top of that. The main reason for that is to stop hop creep. Again, that's another video in itself, but in short, hop creep is a process that can occur when you add dry hops to a beer. It can kick off like a mini fermentation, and with a lot of people only having maybe 2 days contact time with those dry hops, what happens is they will package that beer without realizing that this mini fermentation's kicked off and started to form diacetyl. They will then package that beer, and then, for example, put it in cans, and they'll send it off to a competition or a supermarket or whatever, and it will warm up in those cans or bottles, and that diacetyl can then present itself. So you might not even know you've got diacetyl in your beer, and it can absolutely ruin it. So that's a good way of sort of preventing hop creep, and it's what the big brewers are generally doing. Now, I've recently changed my kit. I've started doing small batch brewing. I don't know if you can see there, I'm using the 10 litre Fermented King Juniors because I'm brewing 9 litre batches now. I was using, for bigger batches, the Firmzilla All-Rounder, which is an absolutely spot-on fermenter. I would highly recommend it. However, as with anything, it has pros and cons. So specifically in relation to dry hop, the pros for me was that it's fully pressurized, so I can do everything oxygen-free. Using a hop bong, I could dry hop completely oxygen-free. The downside to it is you can't dump trub and yeast, etc. So with that comes the risk of that hop creep I was talking about earlier. So the way I used to get around that was I'd only ever do a single dry hop addition. I'd either do it during active fermentation, but a lot of the time I preferred not to. I'd do it towards the end of fermentation and when it had finished. So I'd use the hop bong to dry hop without any oxygen, and then I'd leave the dry hops in at fermentation temperature, so there'd be no soft crash, none of that. I'd just leave it. So if any diacetyl did form, it would get cleaned up. Downside to that is I'd quite often have to leave it on the hops a bit longer, and anything up to a week. I wouldn't worry. I wouldn't go much further than a week on the dry hops, but a week would be absolutely fine. So that was the way I got around it. With these new mini fermenters, I bought 2 of them. So what I'm actually doing for this beer is I'm simulating that dumping of the trub and the yeast and everything as best I can by conducting the transfer. The first dry hop is going to be today. It's going to be during active fermentation. So I don't need to worry about oxidation because there's going to be CO2 bubbling up being formed. So we don't need to worry about that. I can just pop the lid off, put the dry hop in. What I'm then going to do is let this ferment out, and then I'm going to add another dry hop addition. To add that addition, what I'm going to do is soft crash this beer to 14, which will pull out all of the stuff in suspension, including the yeast. I'm then going to clean, sanitize, and purge my other one of these with the dry hops in, and I'm then going to transfer it across into that fermenter, which will avoid any oxidation and hopefully avoid any hop creep. I'll leave it in there for 2 or 3 days contact time, cold crash, and package, and hopefully that will all work out. As I say, doing it this way, I should avoid oxidation and I should avoid hop creep. They're the 2 big killers for dry hops, in my opinion. The final product then. In terms of looks, as you can see, it's hazy and it looks like a double IPA. It looks really nice. It's a nice sort of pale, it's got a bit of orange to it, but it's mainly a sort of pale yellow with a nice sort of white head. The head sticks around for a little while. It's not the best head in the world, but it's not bad. at all. In terms of aroma, you can smell it from a distance, but it's got quite a dank smell to it, which I'm assuming is coming from the Strata, with a nice sort of tropical, almost candied, sweet tropical vibe, which is what I would expect from a double IPA. So for me, double IPAs have this, for some people it might be a bit too sweet or too cloying, but like a sweet flavour to them, which I absolutely love. I think it's what makes them special for me. They're not the sort of beer you can session, but I mean, you're not going to be sessioning a 7-8% double IPA anyway. So this one came in at 7.7%, which is a bit lower than expected, but I'm more than happy with that for first go on the new sort of system. But anyway, let's move on. Mouthfeel, I used the Verdant water profile again, which I expected to work well on this. They make some phenomenal big hazy beers and it's worked absolutely beautifully on that. Super soft, super pillowy and almost silky smooth, so the oats and the wheat have worked really well in there as well. And that is textbook double IPA for me. That I'm really, really happy with that. But on to the important part then, the flavour. I really like that. So for me, I'm not getting a lot of the El Dorado, but there's not as much of that in there, so I'm struggling to pick that out. Whereas straight away, I get that Strata sort of dankness. It's not overpowering, it's working quite nicely with the Nectaron, but it is definitely there. You straight away get that dank hit, which I really like. Cuts through the juice a little bit. Then there's a Nectaron, which is a new one for me, but I am really a big fan of it. I think it's worked really nicely in this beer. So the way it's sort of presenting to me is sweet candied sort of fruit. I'm getting passion fruit, maybe like a little bit of papaya. It's quite tropical, but that's quite a generic term, tropical. For me, it's sort of passion fruit, maybe a little bit of, like I say, papaya in there, but it's like a sweet version of it. Like I say, sort of candied sweetness in there, and it plays really nicely with the dankness from that Strata. As I say, I'm not getting a lot of the El Dorado, but maybe that's because Strata and Nectaron have overpowered it a touch, but I'm really pleased with that. Super juicy, super tasty, really easy to drink, probably dangerous at 7.7%. The Verdant IPA yeast has done its job nicely again. I don't think there's much I'd change there. In terms of the recipe, the sort of malts I wouldn't really change. I'm really happy with that. If I was to do it again, I think what I might do is dial back the Strata ever so slightly and push the Nectaron just to really see what that Nectaron does. I mean, this works beautifully and I'd happily drink that again, but if I was to change it, that's probably what I would do. Other than that, there's not a great deal I'd change. The only thing I really did cock up was not brewing enough of it. So I brewed 9 litres of it, and by the time you've got all of your losses from your hops, dry hops and everything, I probably got 5 or 6 litres in the keg, which, to be honest, is just not enough. But that's about all I got to say on that one. It's a damn nice beer, and I've put the recipe in the description if you would like to give it a go. Please feel free to check out my other grain to glass videos, and as always, thank you for watching. Cheers.